What's up, movie fans? Guys, it's time to re-rank the movies made by the greatest movie studio ever, Pixar. A lot of people are gonna disagree with that being the greatest movie studio ever, but it is though. Last time I ranked all of the Pixar movies, I feel like I didn't get my full opinion on all of these movies out because I had a co-host, so we both needed to talk, and so I didn't get to say everything I wanted to say, so I'm happy that I'm gonna re-rank them today. Plus, since that video, they've had 3 new movies, so yeah, that video's kind of outdated. So here we go. I'm gonna go through all 24 Pixar movies and rank all of them. I recently rewatched all of them, so these are all, fresh opinions. So here we go. Number 24 is Cars 2. This movie is, easily the worst Pixar movie. I don't think there's anyone who disagrees with that. The movie just feels like such a far, drastic cry from the first movie, with the spy plot that just came out of nowhere and does not mesh well with, the world created in the first movie. And Mater, being the main character, also makes this movie kind of annoying, because when you take the comic relief character and you put him in the spotlight, he becomes more annoying than he is funny. And that happens with this movie. So it's just annoying, and it just doesn't make sense with the first movie. So this is easily the worst Pixar movie. Number 23 is A Bug's Life, Pixar's second movie ever. Now, Cars 2 is the only Pixar movie that I really think is bad. Please note that, because literally every other movie on this list I think is good. So this, whole list is really hard to do. I just think that this movie isn't as, emotional, or it doesn't have as many deep themes as all of the other Pixar movies, so it doesn't stand out as much. It is kind of forgettable, but it still has some really fun characters. It is pretty funny. It's forgotten a lot in Pixar's catalog, but it is pretty good. Number 22 is The Good Dinosaur. I think that this movie actually has, a really great main character, Arlo. I think that his whole character arc is pretty good, and I don't really have any problems with the first 20 minutes of this movie. I think that the first act of this movie is actually pretty great, but after that, the whole middle section of the movie, it kind of drifts aimlessly, and it wasn't that enjoyable, because I didn't get how half of the things they were doing was serving the plot. So that brought this movie down a lot. Number 21 is Brave. Brave, I kind of have the same problem, honestly. The whole middle section, it's just drifting aimlessly. But I still think that Brave has, a great relationship between Merida and her mother, and I think that that's, what carries this movie, because I really like how each of them, grow. So number 20 is Cars 3, which is actually a good continuation of the Cars franchise. I think that Lightning, who was a rookie in the first movie, now being a veteran racer and having to face this whole new generation of rookies, I think that that's a perfect way to continue his story. And I think that they ended it really nicely with him, training this new racer. However, I do think that it's a bit dumb how at the end of the movie he still decides to keep racing. I think that devalued his whole, arc throughout this whole movie, since his whole arc was about realizing he needs to make way for the next generation, but then he's still racing. I didn't really like that. So then number 19 is Monsters University. This movie, I think, offers a fairly good backstory for Mike and Sully. I think that it made sense. I liked some scenes with them, and I think that this does explain how they became friends pretty well. The problem with this movie is that when they actually do become friends, I did think that that was a bit abrupt. Like, I really liked their fallout at the end of the movie. I thought that that was fantastic, but when they actually became friends in the movie, I feel like it was a bit abrupt. I don't know, I just felt like it kind of came out of nowhere. Then number 18 is Finding Dory. This movie could have easily ended up the same way as Cars 2, since Dory is the comic relief character of Finding Nemo, but they managed to... Dory, I think, has enough intrigue to her character that I think they did manage to do a pretty good job making the movie still good, even though it follows her. So I did think that, like, her entire journey throughout this movie was interesting. I didn't like the ending of this movie. That's the part that, like, brought it down a bit. I think that the ending where Hank is driving the truck, that roamed into the spy territory in Cars 2, where it's like, what just happened? So yeah, I didn't like that part. Now, number 17 is the first Cars movie. A lot of people hate this movie simply because it has a bit of a confusing, weird world. I agree with that. Like, the whole world in this movie is a bit weird, and it's confusing, which is why it did come this low on the list. But I think a lot of people ignore that this movie has some really good things about it too, like Lightning's whole character arc in this movie. I think that that's fantastic, and I think a lot of people overlook that. So number 16 is Up. Now, this movie is just as emotional, and it has, like, a huge adventure. Like, it has basically everything that a Pixar movie normally has. I don't know, it's weird. With Up, I've always felt like there's something missing that didn't make it come together as nicely, but I can't pinpoint what that is. Like, it's still a really good movie. Pixar's made a lot of really good movies, and I feel like this is kind of on their lower half just because of how many great movies they've made. Up is a really good movie. It didn't make it that high, unfortunately. Number 15 is Pixar's newest movie, Luca, which is one of the simplest movies they've ever made, which I think is both a good thing and a bad thing, because I don't think it stands out as well among some of the other movies that they've made, but at the same time, it is like a really fun, charming movie just about, like, these two friends trying to get a Vespa. I really like a lot of the characters in this movie, and I thought that all of their, like, motivations made sense. Even most of the side characters, I liked a lot of the characters in here. I just think that the simple story doesn't make it, like, one of their best movies ever. Number 14 is... This is gonna make a lot of people mad. Number 14 is Toy Story. Look, Toy Story, it's their first movie ever, and so I do feel like this is also one of the simplest movies they've ever made, because they've, like, found a lot more elements to put in their movies over time. So honestly, I do feel like this movie, like, isn't as good as, like, movies that they've made after this, simply just because they've gotten so much better at making movies in that time. I still think that Toy Story is a really good movie. I really like Woody and Buzz's arcs in this movie. Yeah, it's not as high as a lot of other movies. Number 13 is Onward. This is Pixar's most underrated movie ever. A lot of people, for some reason, don't like this movie, and I don't get why. Like, the world isn't explored as much as it could have been, but that's literally my only problem. I love Ian and Barley's journey, where Ian sets out with his brother to bring his dad back, but along the way he realizes that he's had a father figure the whole time in Barley. I loved how the story did that, and I really liked their journey throughout the movie. But for some reason, a lot of people don't like this movie, and I don't get why. So number 12, which means that we're moving on to the top half of this list. Number 12 is Ratatouille. Now, Ratatouille, I think, has a really great story about Remy trying to offer his talents to the world, but since he's a rat, he isn't gonna be so easily accepted, obviously, and I really like that story and that, like, message that you can offer something to this world no matter where you come from. The thing that brings this movie outside of the top 10 is just simply, for most of the movie, it doesn't really have a clear end goal, which doesn't make it as urgent as a lot of the other Pixar movies, and as a result, I don't enjoy it as much, but it's still a really good movie. It's just not as entertaining. So number 11 is Incredibles 2, which I think is a really good sequel to the first Incredibles because it adds a lot more to the characters. It gives them new obstacles to overcome and journeys. So I think that it is a really good sequel to The Incredibles. The problem with this movie is the villain is not good at all. Her motivation does not make sense. Like, she wants to make superheroes illegal forever, but they're already illegal. There's kind of like a flaw in her plan. Why does she participate in this campaign to make them legal if her end goal is to make them illegal? She's just not a very well thought out character. Moving into the top 10 Pixar movies. This is where the list gets really, really hard. Like, all of the movies I've talked about so far, except for Cars 2, have been hard because they're all good. But the top 10, I seriously don't have a significant problem with any of these movies. So this is really hard, but here we go. Number 10 is Inside Out. This movie is probably the most clever movie Pixar has ever made. Like, this whole world is just so interesting and clever. Like, the train of thought and the memories, it's really interesting, and I really like the world that they created here. And then this movie is also really emotional, and it has a great message on how you need sadness to have happiness. And there's just a lot of things in this movie that I really like. So number 9 is Toy Story 2. This movie is a great sequel to the first Toy Story, just like Incredibles 2, because I feel like this adds a lot more to what the first movie had. It adds all these new themes and, like, interesting new obstacles for Woody to overcome. And I just thought that, like, this was a really interesting way to continue the story. Number 8 is Toy Story 4. Now, I do still think that this movie was kind of unnecessary. Like, Toy Story 3 just ended so well. But I honestly think that this movie's story did make a good case for it being the final Toy Story movie. And at the very least, I think that this movie's ending serves this story really well. I still don't know how I feel about this being, like, the whole end to, like, the full Toy Story saga, because, like, there are some things that kind of contradict the ending of Toy Story 3, but I do think that, like, this movie's ending does serve the story it was trying to tell well. And also, this is easily the funniest Toy Story movie. This movie is just hilarious, and it has a lot of new characters that I thought were really good. So yeah, I think that this is a pretty good movie. Number 7 is Finding Nemo. This movie is fantastic. Marlin and Nemo's relationship, and specifically Marlin's arc of realizing how much he underestimates his son. I thought that is really emotional. It's fantastic. This movie also has Dory in it, and it's pretty funny. And it's just this really great adventure and story. So yeah, Finding Nemo is definitely up there with all the rest of these movies. Number 6 is Coco. Coco is one of their more recent movies. I think that this movie's story is really good. I like some of the themes that they have. It has a really emotional ending. I honestly did not see the twist in this movie coming. A lot of people say that the twist was kind of predictable. I don't know, but I didn't see it coming, honestly. The songs in this movie are great. There's just a lot of things to like about Coco. Number 5, these are the top 5 Pixar movies. My top 5, these are the absolute best in my opinion. So number 5 is Monsters, Inc. This movie, just like Inside Out, is really clever. Monsters scaring people because they need energy for an energy crisis in their world. That's such a clever concept, and who came up with that? That was a fantastic idea. I think that this movie, Mike and Sully's friendship, and then Sully and Boo's relationship, and how Sully and Boo's relationship kind of interferes with Mike and Sully's friendship and causing them to have the argument. I think that all of that was really emotional. The movie's also really funny. This is just a great movie. Now, number 4. Also, I think that out of Pixar's earliest movies, Monsters, Inc. is the best. It came up higher out of their first 5 movies. This is the highest one that I have here. So number 4 is gonna be Soul. It's one of their more recent movies, and I think that it is one of their best. The main theme of this movie is the meaning of life. You can't really aim much higher than that. I think that this movie's message is really inspiring and interesting and hopeful, where it's life doesn't really have a clear meaning. You don't have a clear purpose, so you have to decide what it is. And I really like that message. And this movie's really emotional. It also has a pretty clever world. I just like a lot of this movie. So number 3, the top 3 best movies Pixar has ever made. Number 3 is WALL-E, which I don't think I've given enough credit to WALL-E in the past, specifically in my first Pixar ranking video. I don't think I really talked about WALL-E for the masterpiece that it is. WALL-E is really, really good. A lot of people talk about the first half of this movie and how it manages to convey Wally and Eve's personalities and their emotions without them having hardly any dialogue. And yeah, that part of the movie is fantastic, but I don't think a lot of people give enough credit to the second half of this movie, because honestly, I would describe the second half of this movie as epic. The second half has a lot of action, and they're trying to, reach this goal of getting back to Earth, and I think that the whole battle that they have there was really great. I just really like this whole movie, and a lot of people don't like this movie. I was actually reading, some reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and this movie doesn't have a lot of negative reviews, but I did see that a lot of the negative reviews that this movie got was because people think it's too sad. Duh. That's the point. That's how it's trying to convey its message. The movie starts sad, but the ending of this movie is like this hopeful ending where like the credits show them recolonizing the earth, and like I feel like those people completely miss the point of the movie. Now, number two is The Incredibles, one of the greatest superhero movies ever. This movie has a fantastic, like, the main family is fantastic. I think that all of them had interesting character arcs and journeys in this movie. I think the villain is great, obviously. The action is pretty good. It's really dark, like, I just think that this movie has so many good things about it. I've noticed that a lot of people actually consider this the best Pixar movie, and I can definitely understand why. The Incredibles is just a really, really good superhero movie. And it's also a great, like, family movie. It's just fantastic. I guess a more fitting word to describe it would be incredible. Number one, I feel like you guys know what my number one is if you guys have, like, watched previous videos on my channel. It's Toy Story 3. Toy Story 3, I honestly do think it might be my favorite movie of all time. Its main story is a prison break story, and I like movies that have, like, elaborate infiltration or, like, escape heist things. I like the elaborate plans that they have, and I think this movie might have my favorite elaborate escape plan ever. But that's only, like, the tip of the iceberg with this movie. I know that this isn't the end of the Toy Story franchise now, but this movie does manage to conclude the story of the toys' relationship with Andy perfectly. Andy's goodbye, like, it's just so emotional, and I think that that's just the perfect way to end it. I honestly, I'm tripping over my words right now. Like, this movie is just really good. I probably will make, like, a full review of this movie in the future. I kind of teased that last April Fool's Day when I didn't make it, but, like, I made you guys think I was going to, so yeah. But I probably will do that in the future, but yeah, so Toy Story 3 is my favorite Pixar movie, and yeah, that was my ranking of every Pixar movie. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe. See ya, movie fans.